the one and only Chesney Hawkes.
I am the one and only.
Let's talk about how it all began.
I never had any other dreams of doing anything else. You know, it was always music. Yeah, 1 minute I wasn't famous, the next minute I was. Is that an easy song to smooch to? I don't know. I did that classic pop star thing where I buy everyone in my family a car. It's kind of like being in a club, in a private area, and everything's going great, and then the bouncer picks you up and kicks you out the back. But I think as an artist, you have to have a sense of yourself. I think I lost that a little bit. Those times there, with no money, trying to scraping by, some of the best times of my life. My wife and I just looked at each other like, shit, this is real. By now, everyone's panicking. She said, we're all gonna die. The plane is going down and you're filming.
You're about to die, you've got to put it on Instagram.
If I get knocked down, I will always pick myself up and carry on doing what I do. This better be good, Matt. Oh God, how are we going to do this straight forward? That's a trainer right there, you know.
Guys, Matt Haycox here, and welcome to the Matt Haycox Show, where I have a guest who needs no introduction. The one and only Chesney Hawkes. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. That was officially an introduction, though.
And I'm sure it's not the first time it's been said.
No, you're definitely not the first.
I wanted to claim credit for it.
Yeah.
I tell you, I was actually very excited when I knew we were doing this, and it brought back memories of, I think, like, what is it, 1990, 1991 kind of time when I was 10, 11 years old.
It made me feel old, Matt.
Honestly, well, it makes me feel old. I was in a barn in the outskirts of Leeds somewhere at a school disco for my leaving year of 10th or 11th, chasing some girl around called Sarah something, whose second name I forget, but I still see her to this day, married with kids on Facebook, and I was trying to smooch with her to the one and only.
Is that an easy song to smooch to? I don't know.
I don't know, but it was...
Hasn't got enough soft saps. You didn't have the game. That's why you chose the wrong song.
I'm not a smoocher. I must have been more aggressive than a smoocher, but honestly, that's the first thing that came to my mind as soon as I knew we were doing this, so it's fun.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, Sarah something, if you're listening... You missed out.
Exactly.
You missed out, girl.
It's like one of those late night radio shows. And then secondly, I've got to blame you for bringing back my fear of flying, because I was in Spain last week, and I was flying back to England on I flew back on Sunday, and I was in the back of a taxi. I got some time to kill, so I thought I'd do a bit of Googling and just do a bit of prep for today. And so the first thing that came up on Google was the news, and talked about the emergency landing you just had on the plane. And I fly all the time.
Yeah, me too.
And I've never been a great flyer. And literally about 4 months ago, and I'll happily get on the plane, I'll stay on it, but as soon as there's turbulence, I just always think, oh my God, turbulence, the plane's about to fall out of the sky.
Yeah.
And it's funny how these simple things always, I guess, help you or change your mindset. About 4 or 5 months ago, I don't know if I was listening to a podcast, watching a YouTube video or something, where the person was talking about how fear is just a story that we tell ourselves. Or I'm probably butchering what his explanation was, but fear is just our view on the story that we tell ourselves. And so I guess you tell yourself you're scared of snakes because they're going to do whatever to you. And I guess I was telling myself that I was scared of flying because as soon as I feel turbulence, then I think the plane's going to fall out of the sky. Where the reality is that probably never in the history of time has a bit of turbulence ever made a plane fall out of the sky, and it's just your story that goes with it. And it was just
you think that it might be something else than just turbulence. That's the thing, isn't it? Is this the beginning of the engine going to explode?
Yeah, but I guess it's you elaborating on that story, isn't it? And I kind of got my head around that. And I thought, it's right. I'm telling myself this story that I don't need to. I'm now going to tell myself that, that's why you're looking up in a cockpit and the pilot's got his feet on the desk and he's chilling while we're scared. So I thought, I'm no longer scared of flying. I've been doing all right for the last 4 months, and literally on the way to the airport, I start reading your story. But what happened? Was it?
Well, I fly a lot too, Matt, and I'm kind of similar to you, so I don't like turbulence, and I always, whenever something happens in a plane, I always feel my fists go like,
sweaty palms.
Yeah, slightly like, oh God. But this was a very, very different experience. I was with my wife and we were flying from Greece to Barcelona to do some gigs. And suddenly in the middle of the flight, about 40 minutes in, we're up at 37,000 feet. The masks were deployed. And everybody they just went, came down, and everybody looked at each other like thinking maybe it was a malfunction or something like that. and nobody put them on. It was just, I thought it was some anomaly, you know. And then suddenly the stewardess came running down the aisle, screaming and shouting, "Put your mask on, put your mask on," and talking in Greek as well. And I, "Put your mask on, put your mask on," like really, really panicking, you know. And so we all, you know, furiously put our masks on, and then we really felt the plane drop. It was like way more than any turbulence I've ever felt. It was like boom, you know.
Drop like that way, or
well, it definitely, like the nose went down, you know, and sideways, and all of our ears went, you know, like instantly. What we found out afterwards, it was a cabin pressure failure, but we didn't know that. And everybody was like complaining their ears. And of course, everyone's panicking because the stewardess was panicking. And then during that time, and of course, because it was rattling so much, things started falling out, like bottles falling on the floor and things were smashing in the galley. And the pilot came over the loudspeakers and said, emergency descent, brace.
That's all he said.
That's the only piece of information we had, apart from the stewardess losing her shit. Yeah, so I looked out the window and I could literally see the plane banking so hard, way more than I've ever seen on a plane. Like it literally looked like we were heading into the sea. And my wife and I just looked at each other like, shit, this is real. And by now everyone's, you know, panicking. People doing sign of the cross, babies screaming. Like the woman behind me was like, you know, praying to baby Jesus. And like, I mean, it was pandemonium. And at this point, the stewardess that I said had lost her shit, she was screaming at a guy that was filming. There's a couple of people filming, obviously, in these moments. People do that kind of thing. And
you're about to die, you've got to put it on Instagram.
Well, exactly. You may as well get your last Instagram post out. Anyway, so she's literally screaming in Greek, and found out from the guy next to me. Basically, she said, we're all going to die. The plane is going down and you're filming. So she was annoyed at the fact that he was filming, you know. And she then proceeded to lie on the floor in the fetal position with her mask on. I mean, it was just crazy. All of her training went out the window, I'd say. And of course, that reaction, these are the people that are supposed to keep you calm. Her reaction panicked the whole cabin, and everybody was in just a complete, you know. This went on for 20 minutes with no information, and the plane was rattling and going down.
We descended this whole 20 minutes?
Because we found out afterwards that it was a catastrophic failure of the cabin pressure. You have to, when that happens, when you're that high up, 37,000 feet, you have to get below 10,000 feet. Otherwise, hypoxia sets in and everybody passes out. Okay. And that's how, when those kind of moments happen, that's how planes crash, because everyone's out, including the captain, you know, that's it, and the plane's gone. So humans can deal with pressure under 10,000 feet. So that's what it was. It just had to get down that low. And then we had an emergency landing in Napoli. So,
But it's always the fear of the unknown, isn't it? And in that situation, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it probably from the pilot's perspective, there was never anything wrong or serious. It was just that he had to, you know, do that heavy duty descent, which, okay, it's not comfortable for anyone, but it's probably something he's trained for loads of times.
But very rare, apparently.
Right.
Like, so it's not something that captain or any of those stewardesses or any friends of mine that are in aviation have ever experienced in real life. They do train for it, but it is a rare thing. And
but you think if they could tell you about it while they were doing it, like, look, this is going to be a really uncomfortable 20 minutes. Yeah. It's going to feel like you're dying, but by the way, it's nothing to worry about in the slightest. I remember years ago, I mean, nothing as horrendous as that, but I was flying into New York from Miami, and the weather, I mean, the weather's, you know, always bad in the winter in New York, isn't it? But it was horrendous weather, thunder, lightning. I mean, the plane was just rocketing, and we'd been doing circles around, like I said, babies screaming, stewardesses strapped in, and never once did the pilot say anything. I mean, literally not one thing. While for half an hour, you know, you think you're stuck in lightning storms, and if you could have just come on for 10 seconds to say, listen, I'm really busy, so you're only going to get 10 seconds out of me, but just want to let you know this is completely par for the course. Yeah. And we're all chilled up here. It's going to feel horrible, but I'll see you on the ground in half an hour.
I have friends that stewardesses at BA, and they said apparently if in their simulation stuff where they train for that exact scenario, there's a voiceover thing that they you know just press, and then it does that. Okay. It explains what's happening. There's a failure in cabin pressure. Where we will be dropping, but no, that didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Well, there's certainly going to be AI for it now, isn't there?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean,
Siri says all is okay.
Exactly, that's it. Exactly. But I mean, it was really serious because, like, you know, my wife and I looked at each other at one point and we're like, okay, so if this is it, then this is it. You know, there was some kind of peace that came over us in a way. Like, you know, one thing I think I got from that experience is because we also left a message for our kids.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that was...
Because you really thought it was the end.
We really thought it was the end. And I like, you know, and the message was like, you know, kids, we don't know what's happening. The plane seems to be going down. We love you. We're proud of you. To get well enough, think about, you know, look after each other. Don't worry. We're not scared. We're together. I did all of that. But afterwards, my wife and I, we talked obviously in depth about it. And the one thing that we did get was that, you know, I think people that have been through that kind of, like what you feel is like a near-death experience, it wasn't. But, you know, some people will have regrets. You know what I mean? Oh, I didn't tell my kids I love them enough, or I didn't hug my dad enough, or I never said this, or I never said that, you know. And Chrissy and I were like, you know what? We were doing all right because we do all of that, you know, and we make sure that these things are said, you know. We never ever say goodbye to our kids without telling them we love them, and, you know, and we're the same with each other. And so, you know, if I got anything from it, that was a really nice thing that we're actually, you know, as you were doing all right, you know. Cool.
Well, listen, we're not here to talk about aviation,
but yeah,
but
it's high in my mind right now.
It's a good chat. So let's rewind to even before Sarah in the barn, and let's talk about how it all began. I mean, again, a lot of my listener base is materially younger than me, so they didn't get to know you in those glory years of the 90s. I mean, tell us about your musical start, your family, because you're part of a musical family.
Yeah, my dad is Chip Hawkes from a band called the Tremeloes. They're a big band in the 60s. They had like 13 top 10 hits back then. And so I kind of grew up in a, you know, rock and roll household with guitars propped up in every corner, and all my dad's friends were, you know, in bands and music of some sort. And a lot of them were, you know, 60s superstars like Jerry Marsden from Jerry and the Pacemakers, and all these bands like Herman's Hermits and The Searchers, all friends, you know, and kind of like almost like uncles to us kids, you know. So I grew up with music around, you know. Dad used to take us to gigs from a very early age. So I experienced it.
Did he teach you to play an instrument?
I mean, yes, you know, he taught all of us like a few chords here and there. He wasn't like pushy, you know, musically in that way. But I think, you know, me and my sister had piano lessons. My brother's a drummer now. It wasn't forced into us at all. It was just, you know, because it was so much part of life, we just thought, oh, well, this is what you do, you know. And I gravitated towards piano and writing songs. And my dad actually, you know, he always says I came out singing, you know, because I've never had any other job, you know, what we would class as a proper job. It was always music, you know. The only proper job I had was a paper boy at like 14. So music was just very much part of my life from the very beginning. And I mean, I never had any other dreams of doing anything else. You know, it was always music. And, you know, I started a band at like 13, something like that. And, you know, and even by 14, 15, I was playing piano in local pubs and things like that. You know, and actually earning money at those days. So I actually, you know, started my career really professionally at probably 14, 15 in music.
And I know you say your parents weren't pushy, but were they then helpful when you decided you liked music yourself? I mean, did you try and ride off the back of their contacts and their success to get stuff?
I mean, you know, there was possibly a little bit. It wasn't like riding off them, but like my dad is very, you know, he always wanted me to do it myself, you know, and I think he recognized that I had the passion for music, and that's what you need. It's like, you know, I do a lot of mentoring young artists over the last 10 years or so. I have done anyway. And you can always see the ones that have the tenacity and the passion for what they do. And those are the ones that are going to do well, you know. Talent is kind of secondary in that respect, you know. So my dad saw that. There was a time when I left school at like, you know, 15, and he said, "What are you going to do now, son?" Knowing very well I was going to say, "Oh, I'm going to go off and be a pop star or whatever," you know. And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you to the end of the summer. If you're not earning money by the end of the summer, then you're going to have to, you know, go to school or figure something out, figure a backup plan out or whatever, you know. So my motivation was like, I don't have a backup plan, and I don't want a backup plan. So I went out and found gigs, and I was doing all right by the end of the summer. And so, you know, I never looked back.
I had the same story with my parents. Well, not from a musical perspective, but my dad was a businessman, and I decided that I always wanted to be in business. But they were adamant that I was going to go to university, and I finished. Well, left school at 18, and I was just desperate to get out there working. They were desperate for me to go to uni, and I kind of convinced them to let me take a year off and try and find my way and make some money, so that I didn't have to go back to university at the end of it. Till I still say that, you know, 25 years on, I'm praying I don't have to sign up as a mature student in September.
It's still going. It's always there. It's a possibility.
I've got my deposit on that Open University course. Tell me about, I guess, your first success. And
well, I was like 17, and at this point I was still like playing piano in pubs and stuff around the area, and I was constantly writing songs, always writing songs, and sending off cassettes to record labels. Remember those?
Yep, certainly do.
Yeah. So I auditioned for I saw Roger Daltrey from The Who, like trying to find a young boy that could possibly play his son in a film, and could be his son, could sing, play guitar, which I could do as well, and so I saw it as, and the part was like a musical part, and playing a young singer-songwriter. So I saw that as a potential way into the record business, because back then it's very different to what it is now, the business, where it was all about trying to find that elusive record deal. You know, and if you didn't have a record deal, you know, in the 80s, 90s, it's not going to happen. You know, I mean,
there were no other options.
There was no other option. You know, you had to be recognized and signed. And so I thought, well, maybe this is a good way of, I never thought I'd get the part, because I'd never acted before in my life, and this is quite a big lead role in a film. The chances of that actually happening is it's like winning the lottery in a way, you know. And the audition process was like, I turned up at a kind of X Factor style audition, like with hundreds of young boys, around in the line. And, I got through that first round and then another round. And then I got to, meet some of the producers and stuff like that. And then it ended up getting down to me and one other kid. And we did a screen test at Bray Studios. And I remember turning up there and meeting Roger, and the Who were rehearsing at Bray Studios at that particular moment, and did this audition, and it was like kind of a life-changing thing, as I'm standing on a stage playing an Elvis Presley song in front of Roger Daltrey and all the film producers and everything, and right at the back was Pete Townsend, who was an absolute hero of mine, just with his arms folded, like. And at that point, I wasn't really much of a guitarist at all. I was, as I said, piano player first and foremost. And Dad showed me a couple of chords so I could play this. It was "Well, That's All Right, Mama," that song. And so I ended up getting the part, and that was what kind of pushed me into the business. And what I did the film, and The One and Only was the first single from that film.
And forgive me for not knowing, but did you write the song The One and Only?
No, the song was written by Nick Kershaw.
Okay, well, I love
Nick
Kershaw.
For your younger listeners,
show my age by knowing who he is.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. So Nick was a huge pop star in the 80s, and an absolute genius.
Wouldn't it be good?
Wouldn't it be good, mate? Exactly. Won't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, The Riddle, Don Quixote. Yeah. I mean, just tons of hit songs. And yeah, so, and I was actually a massive Nick Kershaw fan from probably like 13 years old when 1984 Human Racing came out. So I was obsessed with Nick Kershaw, totally loved him. So you could pinch me like 4 years after that, so I was actually getting to work with him, and now Nick and I are really, really good friends, and we've written hundreds of songs together, and
oh wow.
Some I've had on his albums, and some have gone on to my albums, and some have gone on to other projects and things like that.
So in terms of the song becoming a hit and you becoming famous off the back of that, then, so you performed that song in the movie? The
film was done when we found The One and Only. So all of the songs were all written specifically for Buddy, the character of
Yeah.
Buddy. So it was all about the story. So actually, the all of the lyrics for those songs on that soundtrack were written by Nigel Hinton, who wrote the book and the screenplay. And I wrote a few of the songs, music to the songs. And so the soundtrack was picked up by Chrysalis Records. And we got to a point where the film was done and all the songs were recorded at Abbey Road. And the record label were like, we love all the songs, this is great. And, obviously it's a great thing for them. They got a motion picture behind it and they signed me. But we need maybe another song or two just to kind of, I don't know, make it slightly poppier or whatever. And so we found that song. And Nick was kind of taking a break from being a pop star himself and wanting to kind of get into writing for other people. And I still have a cassette with about 15 Nick Kershaw songs that have never been released by him or anything. And The One and Only was one of them. I got little asterisks by it. And then there was two other songs, one called Oxygen, which ended up being recorded by Jason Donovan. Oh, yeah. It wasn't like a big hit, but it was. And then another song called I'm in Love with My TV, which was recorded by Cliff Richard. Okay. It's funny, isn't it? Things you remember. I still got that cassette somewhere.
And then so you got a recording contract off the back of the film?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. With Chrysalis. Yeah. And that's how it all happened. The One and Only, it was the first single. Yeah.
And was it literally overnight success, overnight fame for you?
I mean, it depends how you class overnight success. From that moment, I would say yes, probably.
Well, I guess I'm saying it in the context of how the public would perceive. I mean, yes,
yeah.
Obviously you've been.
Yeah, one minute I wasn't famous, the next minute I was. Yeah. But I guess that's how it happens, isn't it? The record, it took a while. Back in those days, it's not like it is today. Like you put a record out now, and if it doesn't come in, top 10, then that's it. It's all over. But then those days, records organically climbed, and we came in at number 160 or so. It's that much, and then it would kind of go up in increments, and we started doing a few more kind of promotional things, like doing what was it called, Live and Kicking back then with Philip Schofield days, and those kind of things.
And can't mention him.
No, don't. Yes, I know, bless him. So we got to. I think the record, there was a thing back those days called the midweeks. So you got the midweek chart prediction before the Sunday actual charts. And that was the prediction of what it possibly is going to be, even though you still didn't have the kind of the Saturday sales, which was always the big one. And
the election polls.
Yeah, totally. It's all a bit like that. It's a bit like election polls. We predict this is going to happen. And so there was one moment where I think it was at 70, and the midweek prediction it had gone totally out of the charts. That was it. It was done, which would normally mean a record was dead. And this is what happened with The One and Only. So we were all a bit depressed. I think they didn't even tell me. It's it's just. And that week we did a show on the Saturday called The Little and Large Show. You're too young to remember that.
I remember I can't place what it is, but I definitely remember the name.
Yeah, it was a Saturday night kind of entertainment show, comedy entertainment.
Feeling very nostalgic here. I'm now thinking about Pat Sharp and the Funhouse.
Yeah, of course. I know Pat very well. I work with Pat all the time. He's a mate of mine.
all these golden oldies. Yeah. Feeling very old today.
Totally. So we did the Little and Large show, which was 9 million viewers. And that changed everything. And the One and Only came into the top 40 that week.
Okay.
So if it wasn't for Little and Large, that record may never have actually happened.
And how many weeks was it high up in the charts?
Well, it was 5 weeks at number one.
Right.
So, yeah.
And in the top 10 for a while as well? Or?
Yeah, I can't remember the actual stats, but it, as I said before, it was 40, 18, 5, 1, stayed there for 5 weeks, and then gradually kind of moved out.
And how did life change for you around that time? I guess both, how it changed and how did you feel? How did you behave? Was it all a kind of a whirlwind in a blur, or did you start to get to to kind of take advantages of the spoils of fame and money?
No, I think that as my parents came from, they're basically hippies. My parents, they just kind of as far as money goes, it was. I did that classic thing where money came in, and I got big publishing money coming in and big merchandise advances. And I mean, a lot of money in those days. And I did that classic pop star thing where I, buy everyone in my family a car, instantly want to spend money. Oh, money's there, so let's just spend it, So, you know, in hindsight, it would be nice to have kind of like maybe kept a little bit back, maybe, you know, did take a bite out of your cherry and just kind of like, you know, maybe get a few properties, you know what I mean?
I've been a reckless spender over the years.
Yeah. No entrepreneur, you can't be a successful entrepreneur and not taking risks, you know, but I didn't have that entrepreneurial spirit back then. I was just like, oh, I've made it, you know? So you just think this is how it's going to carry on.
And because you think it's never going to end, you think, okay, maybe I'm not going to have a litany of number ones, but I'm now a pop star. This is going to be a 10, 15, 20 year, you know, high-paying career.
I never even thought that in that strategically, if you know what I mean, where like I could see how your brain works a bit different to mine. Like you're saying, okay, so there's a 10, 15 year plan. I never thought like that. I'm thinking this is it for me. I'm now like, you know, a big pop star for forever. That's it. I'm going to keep putting records. I'm going to have, you know, you said maybe not number ones. I'm going to have another 10 number ones. I don't know. I had that kind of bravado and belief in myself, and I think that is probably one of the reasons I've done well, is that tenacity that I never kind of left me, you know. So even after it didn't go as I thought it would, you know, I still dusted myself off and picked myself up and saw the dose of reality come at me, but just...
So what happened after that then in terms of after the success of the one and only? I mean, were there any follow-up ones? Because I know, you know, there became a point where you lost your record contract. And,
we had a couple of... There was... you know, a second single which was, you know, still top 20, and then another single that didn't do so well. I think still came in the top 40, but like, you know, it was obviously going in a different direction in that.
In business terms, for the record companies back then, is that, you know, I mean, I guess for the rest of the world, you know, whether you're in the top 20 or the top 40, you're still one in a million, aren't you? But in record company terms, when you've had a number one and you then do a 20 and then do they switch off pretty quickly?
Well, they did. We made a second album, and it never even came out in this country. So yeah, I do think that happened. I didn't know that was happening, you know, as far as like a business switch off, that kind of like looking at the data and you know, finances and money and stuff like that. I never even thought about those things at that age, you know. And of course, I get it now, and I look at it. And
did you have no one around from a support perspective back then? Any, you know, whether it's a manager, an agent, someone who was genuinely looking out for you?
There were people genuinely looking out for me on an emotional level, for sure. My brother was my drummer, but he was 17 at the time, you know, so we were just like kids. Yeah. And as great as it was to have Jody on the road with me, you know, to keep my kind of head in the from going in the clouds or whatever, and stop. He would stop me from being a dick, you know. He still does. But my dad. But you know, as I said before, my dad's a bit of a kind of, he's total, you know, old-fashioned kind of rocker, you know, and his advice wasn't money-based or pragmatic in any way. It was just like the same as me, really. I grew up with that kind of way of thinking, that, you know, like you just make music, son, just make music, do what you love, and which was great, and that is good advice, of course. But there was no stopping to say, you know, okay, so let's look at where we're at now, and maybe we should think about investing or something like that. That never really happened.
Any wild and reckless purchases, do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I bought, as I said before, I bought everyone a car. My brother, sister, mum, dad, they all got a car. You get a car. And the other thing I did was I bought a studio, which, you know, was great to have, but I spent like maybe £250,000 on a studio. Nowadays, that money there, all that money, I could probably get that in a laptop, you know. It's crazy, you know. Back in the day, it was like the 24-track, 2-inch tape machines that were like 50 grand, you know, and massive DDA desks with, you know, all that stuff. These days, you don't really need any of that.
I remember asking for a 4-track mini recorder for Christmas, you know, back in like, probably the same kind of time, 1991, 1992 or something.
I've still got my old 4-track machine, cassette machine,
So when did you actually get dropped by the record label?
So that would have been probably 93, something like that. So I would have been 21, 22.
Had you felt personally that you were kind of plateauing by that point as well? I guess, you know, before they dropped you, were you still kind of riding high, you know, personally and emotionally, and then you like fell off a cliff?
Yeah, it was a bit like that. I was still touring, and so I was still kind of, you know, doing the promotional rounds. People still, you know, knew who I was. I still had the fans outside the gates, and all the touring was going well. I just finished making my second album, which I was very proud of, actually. I still think that's a really good album, that one. But I guess the record company just cut their losses. You know, they went, right, okay, done. And I just bought a house, which is actually the best thing I ever did. I did actually buy a house in those days.
With a big garage for all these cars.
no, cars weren't even for me, mate. No, it was just a small place in London, actually. And I still own it, actually. That was the best investment I've ever made, you know, in my whole life, as far as like, a good money decision, and it's still there, and I rent it out. But yeah, so I remember I had just moved into that place, and I had no furniture. I'm going to paint this picture here. So I was sitting in a lounge with, you know, a mattress on the floor and nothing around. And I remember getting that call. That was the call to say the record label had dropped me.
Who called you? Your manager?
Yeah, my manager at the time, and. It was a moment that was where all reality hit me at once. Because at that point, for the last 2 years, when you have that much success and it's that kind of fame, your life is not your own, you know, and you don't even do stupid things like you don't go to. I never went shopping in that time. You know, people did stuff for you. I couldn't really go out, you know, to the cinema or to the pub with your mates, like, and all my friends were in university and stuff like that. So for me at that moment, it was kind of it's kind of like being in a club, you know, in a private area, and you got champagne and everything's going great and everything. And then for some reason, the bouncer just kind of picks you up and kicks you out the back, and, you know, you land on the curb and it's raining. You know, that's how it felt. Like, oh shit, I can't. I tried to, you know, call people that had been in my circle for the last 2 years, that traveled the world with me, you know, been everywhere with me, and that as a young person, I felt were kind of like a little family group in a way, you know. An impressionable young person, and then I suddenly couldn't get these people on the phone. So
how did that make you feel?
Well, obviously sad, and it was a wake-up call, the proper wake-up call, and I'm really, really glad it happened, Matt. I really am. At the time, it was hard, you know, but I look back on it now and I'm like, geez, I'm really glad that happened, because I feel like I could see, I've experienced the ups and downs of the business and kind of life in a way at that point. I've seen the world, and now I'm in this place where, okay, my life is actually really is in my own hands. You know, I don't think I'd realized it until that moment, you know? So I thought, okay, so what I'm going to do, I sulked for a little bit, as you would, but just, I still love music, you know? And I still had that passion for music. And so I just started writing and picked myself up. And, you know, at that point, through kind of mid-90s up to the millennium, I was in different bands. I just wanted to be like in Radiohead, you know. So I kind of rebelled from pop in a way, and I didn't go out as myself. I didn't gig as under my name. I had, you know, many different guises.
Were you singing or were you playing instruments? In the
I was singing. I was always singing and writing. And my brother stayed with me through the whole thing.
The drummer?
Yeah. He was my drummer right through. But we had, you know, we moved to the States for a while. I lived in New York for a bit and playing all like CBGBs and all these, you know, famous little kind of clubs in for no money, nothing, you know, just to do it and try and get that record deal back. And, you know, moved to LA for a bit, did the Whiskey A Go-Go and Viper Room and all those kind of fabulous sort of places. And actually, those times there with no money and, you know, trying to scrape in by, and, you know, some of the best times of my life, you know, playing to two old men in flat caps and a Jack Russell with you know, those, I felt like I was kind of like paying my dues the other way round.
Well, there's no pressure, is there? I guess you're doing what you love, and you've experienced the good, you've experienced the bad. You probably realise it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be, and you just back to wanting to make yourself happy doing what you enjoy.
Yeah, and I never lost that love of music. I'm still the same. I can't pass a guitar without picking it up, or if there's a piano, I have to play a chord of some sort, chord of the day.
And tell me, when we were talking at the beginning of this about the recent plane experience, you said that one thing you and your wife talked about after was that you had no regrets. But if you look back to the time. I guess of the great success, and then when things went wrong for you, knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently back then? Like if you were to advise, the kind of early 90s, mid 90s Chesney, other than maybe not buying so many cars, is there anything you think you could have done materially different to have changed your career path or prolonged it in a way?
I mean, materially, yeah, there's some practical things that possibly you could look at the kind of the trajectory of my early career and think, okay, so possibly, little things that maybe that shouldn't have been the second single, or, perhaps we could have held off on some of the promotion, because I feel like, maybe the British public got a bit fed up with my face around that time, because I was literally everywhere. I got fed up with seeing my face on front covers of magazines and things like that. But, I was young, so in my mind, I had a manager, I had a record label, and all these kind of older, experienced people guiding my career. But the one advice I think I would have given to myself is trust your own instincts, because I knew that I was a musician and a singer, and I knew my songwriting, and I knew myself as an artist. And I kind of went along with some people and how they saw my career and how they guided it. And actually, they fucked it up to a certain extent, and I probably should have just listened to my gut, so that's something I think you learn as you get older anyway, isn't it, in life?
How do you think you would advise someone now to temper going with your gut, but also, let's say, not being a diva and being, okay, look, you're an artist, you're a creative person, you kind of know what you want to do creatively, but where's the balance on that between knowing how to take advice from some people who can probably add some value and not just being...
Yeah, I listen. I'm not saying I shouldn't have listened to the people.
I wasn't saying you were a diva, by the way. It was a...
You haven't seen nothing yet, mate.
A question for the greater good.
I definitely... I'm not saying that you shouldn't listen to your elders or whatever, the people that are there to help. I mean, obviously, I was managed by Bill Kerbishley, who managed The Who and Led Zeppelin. Now, obviously, he's done something right in his career, and... And I listen to them, and I think that's a good thing. But I think as an artist, you have to have a sense of yourself. That is the one thing that I look back and think I kind of relinquished responsibility for my own career, my own image, sometimes musically as well, to people that maybe didn't know me as an artist well enough. That's all it is. It's okay to take advice. It's totally fine. But if you don't feel it in your gut that it's not, if you feel it's not right, speak up. That's it. That's all it is, And I don't think that's being a diva at all. There's definitely other diva material experiences that I've witnessed over the years from some artists, but that I think anyone would kind of agree with me on that. That if you're going against your own integrity, then something's wrong.
So let's go back to paying your dues second time round. You're in New York, you're in LA. When did your career take back off again, and how did it happen?
Yeah, so so I did that for a long time, actually, right through to probably very early 2000s, and I hadn't played as Chesney Hawkes, which is what my friends call him. Are you going out as him? And so, I hadn't gone out as under that name for probably 7 years or something like that. And then I got offered a student union gig in Nottingham. Never forget it.
Yeah.
And it was no money, really. I think I got offered a couple £100. It was ridiculous. And I was like, should I do it? I don't know. I think people are going to have forgotten who I am, because at this point it was like you're getting on to 10 years after the one and only. I just thought people had forgotten or not, wouldn't remember me, especially students, because they were all, 18, 19. And I thought, well, they were like 10 when the one and only came out. No one's going to remember this. But I did it because I just thought, I should probably experience this. And I turned up there and it was like 3,000 people at Nottingham University. And I was going on after, I remember because at the time there's a lot of kind of house music going on. It was like just before I went on stage, and I was there with my friend Stewie, who's a guitar player, and the two of us were going out with 2 acoustic guitars. That was my set, like half an hour of acoustic music. And before we were in the dressing room and all I could hear was, And I just thought, oh my God, this is going to be the worst gig ever. No one's going to know who we are. And we're walking out there, 2 skinny guys with guitars, and no one's going to care. And I was really nervous, I remember. Anyway, I walked out there and the crowd, and there had people with like my face on their T-shirts and stuff. And like, and Chesney, like pictures and banners and stuff. And I was like, this is mad. And it was absolutely like almost better than it was back in the early 90s. Like I really felt the love. And what I didn't know at the time is that song, that record, had a life of its own. And I call it a song with wings. And it just went out there and made its own connections with people. And in the student community, it had kind of been handed down like some kind of mantle, and so it was played in student universities throughout those 10 years, and it was a kind of a dance floor filler. And I didn't even know this. I missed the whole thing. And suddenly I'd become, in those 10 years, it's funny what time does, it became like this cult record in a way, and I'd become this kind of cult figure of some sort, but I had no idea that had happened. So when after that gig, that was a kind of a turning point for me, and I never really looked back. And after that, I did the whole university circuit. I was like, I think we should put the money up. So, and we did that for years. And I never stopped, playing out as him since then.
Have you just carried on doing, I guess, the one and only and the kind of classics from them, or have you now started to, I guess, find an appeal to a new audience and bring in the new tracks? Good
question. There's definitely a lot of appetite for me to do the old songs from that Buddy song period, the film period, like obviously One and Only, and I do those, but I never stopped making records. That's the thing. Even through those years, I made albums. I'm constantly trying to build to a new audience. And actually, with the advent of the change of the business and social media, and I'm actually able to kind of put these things out independently myself.
I was going to say, what do you do now? Do you have a record label, or do you do it personally?
Well, over the last 15 years or so, I've been an independent artist, which has been an interesting journey. Because your career is in your own hands, and nowadays you have to kind of really build on social media and all that, which is difficult for someone of my age to kind of, get to grips with. And
just for people, I guess, listening to understand, what does that mean in real terms when you're an independent artist? So you've got no record label, but I guess what you put the money up yourself to go into the studio, you do your own promotion on social, however, and then somehow, I guess, people still can download from iTunes, etc. It's just that there's no big record company funding it all.
Yeah, that's pretty much what that means. Yeah, I made the records myself. I did a crowdfunding thing on one of them. Okay. So there's a fan base out there that helped me create the record and have enough money to kind of like promote it and put it out and stuff like that. And that's what I've been doing the last kind of, maybe 10 years. But now I have this new record that I've just finished with a guy called Jake Gosling, who's like a super producer. He discovered Ed Sheeran. He's worked with all, literally you name it, he's worked with. He's one of those guys, and it's I'm so proud of this record, and it's got a lot of interest, and we're now. I've got a new manager who's fabulous, and a new team that's like really exciting, new agent, and things are kind of like picking up in a very marked, different, exponential kind of way, you know. So I feel an excitement and a buzz about what's happening in my career right now. So I think, you know, watch this space as far as that's concerned, Matt.
And how does it make you feel? Because obviously, like you say, you put out new albums. You've got a new team. You know, you've been constantly working on music for that. You know, well, I guess, you know, since you were a teenager, you know, but certainly for the last 20, 30 years since the success of The One and Only. But you know, if you talk to, let's say, many men on the street, it'll be Chesney Hawkes, one and only, one hit wonder. You know, what does that piss you off? The term like one hit wonder?
No, I see it as a challenge. You know, so like every gig I do is an opportunity to grab someone and or for someone to come in that had been dragged by their wives, that it was a fan of mine at the time or whatever, and think to, what's this going to be like? You know, an hour of Chesney playing The One and Only or whatever. And then I want them to go away and say, oh, actually, he was really good, and his new songs are great, and you know what I mean. And that does happen, you know, a lot. And that's my kind of goal. My challenge is to, you know, grab one gig at a time, one fan at a time, as it were, you know. And it's fine. I like that, actually, because you know, the pressure's on me, and I feel like I can do that. You know what I mean? So I've been really enjoying that kind of gathering of new fans, and it's funny that I still get, like, on my social media and stuff, I was like, there's quite a lot of young people, you know, that I don't know if it's because their parents have, you know, fans of The One and Only, and they've kind of like heard it and then dug into me a little bit. But yeah, it's interesting.
We were talking just before we started recording about, you were saying that you mentor quite a lot of young artists nowadays. Having lived through, I mean, I guess so many, not so much extremes, but differences, you know, having been with a record company, having been independent, having, you know, been successful pre-social media, having now experienced using social media to promote yourself, and I guess having had big highs and big lows. What is your advice to young artists now?
Well, as I said before, and the biggest thing for me is recognizing that tenacity, and if you don't have that, you know what, it's just not going to work for you. And I mentioned earlier on about like having a backup plan. I think if you have a backup plan, then you're not all in. And I've always had that kind of that thought process of, I will always, if I get knocked down, I will always pick myself up and carry on doing what I do. It's a belief, you know, it's a genuine belief that I know I can do this. And I see that in some young artists, and I recognize it because I see it, you know, them in myself, and that is the biggest thing to recognize. My advice to people, like, you know, is if you're going to go into the business, like, you don't believe the hype, don't believe it when people say you're shit, or they, you know, don't like that song, or that gig didn't go very well. Don't believe it, because it just doesn't mean anything. And don't believe it when people are saying you're great as well. It's like, you know, you have to have a balance. You know, my dad actually said that to me early on, and that really stuck with me.
And I mean, do you see yourself, you know, strumming the guitar and playing the chords on the piano until the day you die?
Definitely. Oh, that'll never stop, ever. Yeah, it's been passed on to my kids as well.
I mean, I love seeing the older musicians, you know, obviously, particularly, also obviously because they're older, it's the guys from before. But you know, when you see like the Stones or Rod Stewart or someone like that, you know, performing at, you know, late 70s, you know, Elton John and stuff. But I mean, it must, well, if you're into music, it must be the most unbelievable lifestyle to get to do that, from being 20 to being 80. And
no, I absolutely. And it's a very, obviously, those legends that you mentioned there, I mean, it's a very rare thing to have that kind of longevity, and there's not many out there that have that. So yeah, no, that was always a dream of mine from early on, that I was still going to be playing music into my 70s, and you know, who knows, into my 80s.
we can do a round 2 in 20 years' time. We'll be sat here. I'll still be wondering what happened to Sarah from the disco.
Sarah something. I love Sarah something.
So look, you've said watch this space. I mean, and before we go, anything specifically in this space you can tell us that's coming?
Well, mainly this new album. It's called Living Arrows, and I'm very, very excited about it. And we're right now in the kind of business sense, looking for a home for it. So whether that's a record label or whether that's investment to help out with it. We're looking for the team to the right team and in the correct way to put it out. So
you wouldn't crowdfund us again?
I mean, it's possible. I'm not kind of like discounting anything, to be honest with you. I just know that this record deserves the right environment, you know, and we're working on that.
Cool. Well, I'm sure it's going to be great, and you know, you've done I guess amazing stuff and amazing stories over the last 30 years, and I'll look forward to watching the next 30 years. Chesney, thanks a lot for being here, buddy.
Oh, thanks for having me, Matt.
Thank you.